And now, here's Mike Muse with the political news.
So let's get right to it and meet the candidates.
That completes the opening statements.
We're going to get right to it.
On Sway in the Morning.
All right, Mike Muse, Mike Muse.
Yo, what's happening, brothers? So good to be here with you this morning, Sway.
Yes, indeed, Mike Muse. Good work yesterday. We had a town hall discussion with the cast of the Black Panther movie.
And the director.
Yes.
And the director, Ryan Coogler, came by. Denai Guerrera came by. Chadwick Boseman
came by. Michael B. Jordan and Lupita Nyong'o.
Yeah, and it got real powerful up in there.
It did.
Lupita is beautiful.
She is.
Woo, she was amazing.
She is.
Her legs was hanging out.
Looked like that chocolate I gave y'all for Valentine's Day.
Nah, she was moisturized.
And Denai as well.
Denai's hair,
Denai
though.
is beautiful.
Woo, beautifully shaped head, everything.
Yeah. Nah, she was moisturized. You hear that? All right.
Love you, Sway.
That was a great discussion you led, brother.
We all kind of thank you, Mike Muse.
Yeah, it's good, man.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome, brother.
Thank you. It was an important discussion.
It was.
You know, and I thought it took a great direction. You know, even and we were laughing afterwards because Lupita and I were talking and Denai, and we were talking about they thought the conversation went really well. And I said, look how many impactful topics and subject matters and issues we were able to dive into. And this is based on a comic book movie.
Yeah. It is.
You know what I mean?
It just shows the power of film, right? And how film can really be a mirror to our society. And what I love about this one is a global society, too, not just in America, but the globe.
The global society, right? Yeah. Speaking of society, what's going on in our society today, Mike Muse?
Let's take it national. Over here, I was like, man, I have an update, and we were talking on Monday regarding the fallout from the Secretary besides the White House, Mr. Rob Porter, who was allegedly accused by two ex-wives, a girlfriend, as a black eye picture for one of his ex-wives for domestic abuse, and has a restraining order. And a lot of challenges came out about it in terms of really the Me Too kind of hit the White House in a very huge public way. And it's a matter of how did the White House handle that? Rob Porter was still allowed to have interim security clearance after allegedly that the White House was informed about the situation that occurred with his ex-wives. Sway, this is one of those situations where the scandal or conversation that we're having right now, it should not have lasted 7 days. It should have been a one-day story. It should have been a one-day story of you show the black eye, and then you make moves on his employment, and then you end the story there. But the White House just hasn't been able to bring this to a close, and the reason why, Sway, is the question has been regarding how much did the White House know and when did they know it. So we had Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders come out on Monday, and she said that the process was ongoing. The White House had not received any papers on the completion of that background check. Sway, we've been talking about the Chief of Staff, John Kelly. His job is in trouble in terms of the way he's been handling, I'm going to say allegedly his job is in trouble by the way he's been handling the scenario. He continuously says that in November he got an update on some of the investigations regarding Rob Porter. The update that there was some things that need to be looked into. Literally, that was it, he said. And that last Tuesday is when he found out. And that's all he has to say. That's all he knows. But what we've come to realize...
Man, they be lying, man.
They do.
That's all I know.
Yeah.
You know that's like Pence. When Pence, you ask Pence a question, I don't know yet. You know, I've been on the road.
Yep.
I haven't been briefed.
Haven't briefed at all. And Sway, the challenge is when Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that on Monday, in terms of the investigation wasn't complete, I don't know if she realized or not that the FBI director who was appointed by Trump was headed to the Capitol Hill to do a Senate hearing regarding this very issue. And here's what he had to say on Tuesday.
The FBI submitted a partial report on the investigation in question in March. And then a completed background investigation in late July. That is, soon thereafter, we received requests for follow-up inquiry, and we did the follow-up and provided that information in November.
So they received requests for a follow-up inquiry from the White House?
From the White House in November. But what he said was that it was completed in
July.
It was completed in July. They followed up in November. They got an answer. And then in January, the FBI then directed the White House new information that came to them regarding Rob Porter. So Rob Porter had been there in the White House since the beginning.
So the White House knew, basically.
Exactly. But here's how Secretary Sanders reported it shortly thereafter in the afternoon. Remember, this was in the morning from FBI Director Christopher Wray. And here's what Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders had to say in the afternoon.
That it was closed in January. So who's telling the truth here?
Both. As I said, the FBI portion was closed. The White House Personnel Security Office, who is the one that makes a recommendation for adjudication, had not finished their process and therefore not made a recommendation to the White House.
And let me just clarify one more point. You said yesterday that you didn't get any paperwork from the FBI. Chris Wray said that he did submit paperwork at all of the various moments that were.
Again, that would come through the White House Personnel Security Office, which had not completed their investigation and not passed that information to the White House.
That you did receive paperwork.
Again, the White House, I think you need to be very clear about there's multiple groups here.
Stop lying. You know what? And this ain't about being whatever your political affiliation is. This man is a woman beater, right?
Yep.
Does who? What Republican? What Democrat? What Independent? Green Party? Who's down for it? Who's an advocate? Who's a supporter person who does that?
Wait, there's a picture, and we talked about this a lot on this show in terms of the Me Too movement. There's new.
Well, let me say this: he hasn't gone through due process yet.
No, there hasn't been a court.
Okay, so
in the sense of that. So again, this is allegedly.
Okay.
He hasn't had any court appearance regarding this issue. But as we talk about a lot on this show in terms of the Me Too movement is a very nuanced. It isn't a one-size-fits-all scenario. But in this particular case, there's evidence, a physical evidence of a picture with his ex-wife with the black eye. There also too is physical evidence of a restraining order that was also taken out against him. So you have to look at the evidence and then make your own intuitive decisions on what you want to do from there. Sway, we talked about this, and I always remember the first conversation we had during inauguration, right, during President Trump's inauguration, and when the pictures came out in terms of the crowd sizes. There was a physical evidence of one crowd size was larger from President Obama's, and then the following one was yes, a smaller one. And then we saw the press secretary come out and said that this was the largest size that we've seen. And then we asked a question. Yes, it's a small amount, but it leads to a larger narrative and larger issue when it comes to that.
Okay, so let's talk about something else. You wanted to talk about what's going on in Russia.
Yes. So we saw something happen on Capitol Hill yesterday too as well. We saw all the intelligence chiefs gather to discuss whether or not the Russians are meddling in our midterm elections that are coming up, and here's what they all had to say.
Russian activity and intentions to have an impact on the next election cycle here.
I agree with Director Pompeo's assessment about the likelihood of the 2018 occurrence as well.
This is not going to change or stop.
Yes, it is not going to change, nor is it going to stop.
We have not seen any evidence of any significant change from last year. I agree with Director Pompeo.
As do I.
For 11 months, they've had this phony cloud over this administration, over our government, and it has hurt our government. It does hurt our government. It's a Democrat hoax.
So what you saw there.
So what were we listening to right there?
So what we're listening to was that there is evidence and reporting that's coming out that Russia is intended to meddle in our 2018 midterm elections, also too using technology within terms of bots. And so all the intel chiefs are all Republican appointed by President Trump. You have CIA Director Mark Pompeo, you have the FBI Director Chris Wray, you have the NSA Director Admiral Michael Rogers, Defense Intelligence Agency Director Lieutenant General Robert Ashley, and National Geospatial Intelligence Agency Director Robert Cordelio, all coming out and saying that there is evidence that suggests that Russia will be meddling in that. The difficulty with that, though, is that President Trump continuously says that this is a hoax and this is made up by the Democratic Party, which goes in sharp contrast of all his intelligence chiefs. What we didn't hear was later on was that some of the senators were asking the intelligence chief to square up the positioning of this so that the president can actually make decisions on what he wants to do going forward to protect our election cycle that is coming up, because the intelligence chief can't move unless the president of the United States determines what the decisions and strategies should be going forward to prevent the Russians from meddling in our 2018 midterm elections.
What's that look, Heather?
People better go out and vote. I know that much. I mean, you got to get out here. That's the main thing. I think we're just kind of getting more and more comfortable with blaming this and not looking at, oh, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, which is the real thing, Mike Muse. Don't get me twisted in saying that, there hasn't been any form of meddling, because I believe that it was as well. But that's not an excuse for you not to go out here come these midterms. These midterms are very important. You've been talking about them since last year. Go out and vote. I'm going to be on you.
Yeah, it seemed like all the the scandal around voting in our election process probably is making people exhausted.
Exhausted.
And probably feel like the system ain't gonna work anyway.
It's like, here we go again.
Here we go
That's
again.
the mentality that's just kind of like this underlying tone. What's the sense? What's the reason? What's the purpose of it? But we have to get out here and vote. We just had a big election in New Jersey in terms of our governor. It wasn't as crowded as I would have liked it to be. It feels like people are just like, the honeymoon phase is over.
What do you think? You're out there in the streets a lot. You're out there on the road. What kind of reaction you getting in regards to this Russian investigation?
The majority of Americans conclude that Russia did meddle in the investigation. Unfortunately, where President...
In the election.
I'm sorry, in the election. Unfortunately, the president feels that he's in a difficult position. He feels that if he agrees that there was meddling in our election, then that would deem him as a winner by default by some rigging. But he hasn't really grasped the concept, though, that the Russians didn't meddle in the machines. There was no meddling in the voting booth. There was no meddling when you go check a box. There was none of that. It was, what did the Russians do to cause confusion in the election cycle with the bots? And for those not familiar with bots, this technical term of computers acting as humans to spew information, to cause confusion, and to drum up narratives and false reports, right? So that's what the whole meddling is. And the danger of that is that if we don't get that under control, then the electorate, when they go in to vote, becomes confused on what are they voting for, how should they vote. But the danger and what the intelligence chiefs are kind of sounding alarm with too as well is we want to make sure that our election system is protected too as well day of voting.
Yeah.
So you want to invest money and resources to make sure that the voting ballots does not get tampered with. You want to make sure that the machines are okay, right? So you want to make sure that the counting aspect is fine. And so, but more so too, Sway, you also too want to make sure that the individuals, all of our voting records are held within the Secretary of State, all of our states that we are in. You want to make sure the data isn't interfered with.
Yeah.
We touched on machine learning, big data, artificial intelligence last week on this show, where we talked about the capabilities of these machines and technologies interfere when it comes to the rosters and the roles of who can vote and who cannot vote. And so when we are not paying attention to that, we leave ourselves as a nation vulnerable. And that is really national security, right? That is the thing that makes America so unique and so fantastic, is our freedom of elections, and that keeps our democracy intact. So we want to make sure that stays intact.
We have Rich from Philly on the line. Rich, good morning. How you doing,
What's
Rich?
up, Rich?
Good morning, fam. Good morning, fam.
Wait, is this Rich, the attorney?
Yeah, it's Rich, the attorney.
Okay, Rich, the attorney, man. It's one of our in-house attorneys right here. What's up, Big Rich?
Hey, I mean, since I'm an attorney, what the attorney is, I don't know if Mike was going to mention Michael Cohen last night actually admitting to paying Stormy Daniels that money.
Yeah, it was one of my stories that we had time to get to. I don't know if we're going to have time to get to.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Yes.
We're going to move the clock around a little bit this morning. Go ahead.
Yes. So
it's a juicy one. I like that one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Americans do like that one, Richard. So what has come out was allegedly the porn star Stormy Daniels has come out and said that she had an alleged encounter with then just a citizen, Donald Trump, who was married at the time to his wife Melania. They had an alleged encounter in 2006. What happened was President Trump has denied it, the White House denied it, but through an investigation, it came out that there was a shell company that was formed that ended up paying Storm Daniels $130,000. At that point, Michael Cohen, who's the attorney for President Trump, neither confirmed or denied the allegations of that information. What this organization did, called Common Cause, was they actually rallied the Freedom of Information Act to the Federal Elections Commission and caused a case really that said we need to know, was any campaign funding used in order to pay off Stormy Daniels as she wouldn't go public with her story to the run-up of elections. As a result, they had Michael Cohen then had to go on record to say that the campaign didn't fund it because that would have been a campaign violation, would have broke the law. But he actually paid he, as in the attorney Michael Cohen for President Trump, paid the porn star $130,000 out of his own pocket.
Damn, what kind of homie is that?
Yeah. And he says, for the record, to be clear, he says that he has not received any reimbursements back from President Trump.
Why would he pay it out his pocket? Why would he do that?
That's the question everybody wants to know, is why would President Trump's attorney pay $130,000 out of his own pocket to a porn star who allegedly had a sexual encounter in 2006, who was seemingly going to go public right before the election.
Rich, thank you. Rich?
Just saying, he better watch out for his bar license.
Oh, wow. So he could lose his bar license.
He definitely can.
Wow.
For doing a favor for a friend?
Hey, is it a friend or is it his client? You gotta differentiate that line.
It's his client, obviously, who's his friend. Yeah. Thank you, Rich.
For that
my man,
story.
Rich. My man.
Rich about that scandal.
Whenever Rich from Philly call, make sure you put him on. Rich, have a good day. Paul, what do you want to say? He's in Ohio.
Hey, I just want to thank you all for talking about this first off, but I wanted to clarify, when you all were talking about election interference and you all said that the actual votes weren't changed, we actually don't know that because there's not been an investigation into that. What we do know is that they hacked into voter registration files to possibly disincentivize people to not vote. They show up and then they're taken off the voter roll. So, no, they didn't change the votes, but when they come to the poll, they couldn't vote. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clarified because that's, I think, important.
Well, there's been no reporting from any state, whether it's a blue state, red state, that there's been any rigging of any election of the voting booths themselves. So that has been conclusive by the Secretary of State. When it comes to individuals coming to their polling place and their name not being on the roll, you can't say that is due to Russian interference. There are just been instances, even prior to the 2016 election, 2012, 2008, that is an occurrence, unfortunately, right? But that goes to a bunch of states and scenarios that have done things within their states that have interfered with the voting log and voting registration that makes people have like one form of ID or short. There's some states where you don't have to show your ID. There's other states where you do have to show a form of ID before you can vote.
So you got to do two forms of ID, all these different.
Exactly. So that brings into another conversation for another day in the terms of how do you protect voter registration and voting drives and making sure that all Americans have access to the voting booth when it comes to that. So in terms of that regard, there is no meddling with Russia when it comes to that. The caller is correct, though, when he talks about strategic targeting. What made this Russian meddling investigation so interesting, Sway and Heather B., is the fact that the Russians knew how to pinpoint specifically districts in terms of how to influence the election by sending misinformation to specific districts and specific voters. With that type of specificity, that wasn't just a random occurrence, right? So there was more some sophistication that was done to that. And so that is what is so troubling about us not paying attention to what Russia has done in order to make sure that these bots stay out of the public space of our domains, but then also, too, to make sure they don't go further, to which the caller is talking about, to make sure that our voting booths and rolls don't get affected via technology, because we traditionally, majority, like 99% of America votes on the paper ballot system, but there are some machines that are electronic, so we can be careful of that. But to this day, though, Sway, every voter registrant is on a computer database. So that is what is of concern. And do our states have enough resources, Sway, in order to make sure that database and that servers are secure? So when we ignore that, then we leave ourselves up for exposure.
Vulnerability. Paul, thank you, Paul. Paul, you're a citizen, brother. All right, have a good day.
Thanks, Paul.
Let's continue this conversation online, man. Anybody want to comment? And let's just be real, man. Let's be real. Got to eliminate these dividing lines, these titles and politics, and just let's be real with each other.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
We hope, man.
Well, let's be real, man. Get up Mike Muse directly.
Yes, at I am Mike Muse, M-U-S-N-Sam-E on Twitter and on Instagram.
We have sports up next.
Yeah, we do, Sway, and I'm talking to NBA.
Miss me with that bullshit.